As for my agenda, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to talk about the elephant in the room when we talk about the mental health, especially that's got the focus in all the boardroom discussions when we were sort of kept in the isolation that was thrusted upon us during the very disruptive 2 years of pandemic and beyond. Now, the irony is, very quickly, allow me to say that such, for example, if you, the issues like depression or anxiety, when we talk about mental health, can really be dealt with, say, conversations, therapy, medication, yes, the right diet, exercise, medication, or meditation for that matter. So when we are so open to talk about a high BP or a diabetes, why not this? We need to discuss this and to talk about how the change really starts at the top, a 360-degree approach to physical and mental well-being. Allow me to please welcome our session discussants along with the panel chair. Our panel chair first up, could we please have Sunit Sinha, Head People, Performance and Culture, KPMG in India. Sunit, welcoming you with a beautiful round of cheer. Thank you for coming forward. You're going to be leading the talk and extracting the perspectives from our speakers. Could we have Salil, the Chief Human Resource Officer and Vice President, Maruti, Suzuki, India. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Salil with a good round of cheer. Let's also welcome, I'm hoping, Adya Goyal, Head HR, Moy Tensei, and Shandon Wineries also in the house. Adya, hi. And so good to be seeing you, all the warmed up energies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a good, warm round of cheer. And Sunit, with that, I'm going to hand over the discussion about the elephant to you. Thank you. Over to you.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for that. It is the elephant in the room, so I'll stand up for a bit. I was feeling cold over there. Welcome to my two colleagues who are going to... I don't know if the picture... We were going to be four of us. One of our colleagues had to leave because she had a flight to catch. And I'm told we only have 15 minutes. So is that including audience questions? Sorry, 15 minutes is including audience questions? Okay. Okay, 25. I was told 25 minutes. So we'll talk for 15 minutes and 10 minutes for questions. So before I kind of set us off, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the view from the top, or change starts at the top. I mean, one of the things that I personally reflect on is when you think of well-being, and maybe I'll just, the way we thought of doing this is I'll open with a few comments and reflections, personal, professional, and then hand it over to my two esteemed colleagues here to give their own perspectives on what it means for them and what they've seen. I think firstly, in my mind, well-being 360 view approach means you need to look at it holistically. There is physical, yes, there is mental or emotional as well. So I would say it's about well-being of the individual. And I think as I reflect back over, say, go back to 2019, we still used to talk about wellness. We used to talk about mental health. We did talk about well-being. However, I think the shift that the pandemic came and reminded us in a very brutal manner in many ways. I'm sure all of us in the room have probably been impacted in some way or the other, whether directly or indirectly. I think it reminded us about the importance of it. So I think the one shift, at least my reflection point, is from being something which was a nice to have, and maybe which was driven a lot by individual leader preferences or cultures of organizations. I think irrespective of geography, industry, size of organization, nature of ownership, I think all institutions and organizations got impacted by it. And I think yes, it is the big elephant in the room, because I think from being hidden, it's come right to the center. So it's not any one individual's preference, while it's still an individual choice in terms of what you may or may not want to do from a well-being perspective. But I think organizations can't ignore it, and they have to walk the talk. So we'll do a little bit of a rearview mirror, and I'll request both Adya and Salil to talk about what they saw in the last couple of years. I think the other thing also is that the world we live in, we all have, all mostly HR professionals in the room, I would imagine, we all love terms like VUCA and ruptured, right? I recently was preparing for a session with some of our young directors in the firm who just got newly promoted directors. And I actually, in that research, came across a word which I didn't know. It's called Bani, I'm told. Some of you in the room may have already heard about it. I personally felt that Bani, B-A-N-I, seems to actually touch the individual sense that we all have had for the last 2.5 years. B for brittle, A for anxious, N for non-linear, and I for incomprehensible. A lot of us, if you go back to early 2020, and we all read those newspaper reports and various scenarios by consultants like us about how the pandemic will play out, none of those models worked, right? If you go back and check, I'm sure there are a lot of consultants who are probably embarrassed by their predictions from early 2020. The pandemic had its own plans. But I make a larger point. I think the pandemic has come and gone, and hopefully it's a one-in-a-century pandemic. We won't have it something like that back anytime soon. But the world we live in is truly brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible, because there are other things that have come on the horizon. There is potentially the threat of a global recession. We in India are probably a little buffered or cushioned, but there are parts of the world where things are not looking that good economically. There is the climate crisis amongst us. I often tell my colleagues who work in the ESG space and the climate space that there is no climate change coming. I think we're in the middle of it. Tech disruption and industry disruption continues, and there's geopolitical chaos as well all over the world. So there's enough and more reasons for people to get stressed. And it's not just about economic livelihoods and job security. It's about physical well-being. It's about how you're coping with it. So that's the little bit of the context. So in my mind, a lot of this is not just about looking at the rearview mirror, which we'll hear about, but it's also about the fact that potentially this is something that needs to be embedded into the way organizations and leaders think about managing organizations. I mean, and at least whenever I scour LinkedIn, I have seen enough and more examples of people appointing chief wellness officers or chief well-being officers, not only talking about engagement, but talking about happiness at work. And a lot more people coming out and talking about things that matter to them. And we have an interesting panel here. I represent professional services, consulting as an industry. I've been a consulting lifer for 25 years. Salil, you've been in manufacturing, steel, now in auto, and Adya, you come from a very different background, luxury brands, retail, the beverages industry. So it'll be great to hear your insights. I mean, I just set some context, both individually and also from an organization perspective. What were some things that you saw in the last 2.5 years which were very different when you want to talk to well-being, the response to it? And maybe then we'll switch to what we plan to do in the future. So maybe, Salil, I'll go with you and I'll come to you, Adya.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sumit, and nice to have three of us together here. First of all, let me give two perspectives, which I thought is very important before I talk about the subject directly. Number one, the fact that today we are present here and we are talking about it, that itself is a big change. Before the COVID, the subject on mental wellness or depression, dealing with stress and anxiety was something which was talked about, but in a very limited manner. Today, at least we have opened up the forum for a subject like this to be discussed openly. And this is the phenomena which we see at the workplace. That is part one. And that's the silver lining about the whole pandemic thing which happened with us. Coming to what happened during the pandemic, we saw the first phase. First phase was little conservative because the government was also not prepared, nor the industry was prepared, nor the household was prepared. And the second phase was eventually very bad. Practically every household was impacted. And so the industry was impacted, and we were all in the middle of the crisis. I remember very well when we were in the second phase and we were losing people, we were losing our colleagues. And even in Maruti, we lost many people because of the second phase. And overnight, the decision was taken to create a disaster management cell. And that was the first thing we did. A complete department was overnight being made effective, called disaster management and business continuity, because this was something which we are looking for years to come. Not only COVID, but for any kind of disaster, whether it is a terror attack, whether it is an earthquake, whether it is floods, whatever, but then we need to be prepared as industry to handle such kind of a crisis. So that was part one. The second was to restore the people's confidence. I mean, for me, it was the employees. Though, again, suddenly HR became the face of the organization during the crisis because everybody was looking at you, what is the answer and how are you going to deal with it? So we had to open a control room, we had our doctors, we had our fleet of ambulances, and the bigger crisis was oxygen cylinders and concentrators. We invested money, we invested in resources to get concentrators from all across the world. from wherever it was possible, to the extent that we booked floors in the hospitals only for the employees so that they get a bed and they can be attended. So these were some of the initial reaction which we thought is must. Subsequently, as things subsided and became normal, then came the second part for which we are here, the mental well-being and the physical well-being, to the extent the spiritual well-being. And then we started discussing about it once everything was normal, because even post-lockdown, it took some time for us, especially for our manufacturing industry, to get back to the normal working process. Because even after the lockdown, when we got the permission to operate, we had to prepare our people, we had to communicate with the various stakeholders, including government, at the same time prepare the plant to manufacture vehicles as per the protocol. So that was a bigger challenge. Subsequently, we went back to the table to discuss about the mental well-being, the mental health of the people, and then we noticed that there are cases which are increasing. Today, at least as I mentioned earlier, people do not hesitate in sharing, and the way communication has taken a different stage in terms of how do you exactly overcome the part where people are not shying away from discussing their problem. They come to a situation wherein you receive a mail about some help which is to be provided, and then on a case-to-case basis, that is a separate activity which we thought we will do it. At the same time, during the COVID period, we had created our own app, which was known as Wellness Mitra, wherein people had to feed data every day about their temperature, fever, any symptom, when are they reaching the office or not coming to office, things like that. And that used to give us some information about people, our own employees. Subsequently, we thought that this is the best time to graduate from Wellness Mitra to Happiness Mitra. So maybe I'll come to that in the later part of the discussion.
No, but very well said, Salil. Thanks for sharing that perspective. I think a couple of takeaways and something that resonates with me, and we were talking about this, that today disaster management or crisis management is now part of your standard operating procedure or even your operating model. And I think that's something to think about, that it's not just about well-being being a program, but actually being part of an organization's capability. So that's one. The second was, I loved the point about Wellness Mitra to Happiness Mitra. We'll come back to that. Maybe here I'll bring in, are there very different industry? At the same time, I know we were talking before the session that you had perspectives from two different geographies, because you worked in one geography, then you worked in India. But more importantly, maybe also if you'd want to double down and talk about how did leaders cope with this? Because one of the things that was apparent even in the last 2 years to me was the fact that obviously HR and leaders were in the middle of things, taking decisions, looking after people. But how did we make sure that they were looking after themselves? Because care starts with self-care is one of the things that I at least got to know in the experience I had over the last 2 years. So Adi, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, including the different geography perspective.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Salil, about the people that you lost during the time of COVID. I think we can all identify with that. And I'm glad that the organization and your leadership is recovering from that. When the pandemic hit, I was actually in the Philippines. The reaction in the Philippines versus India was very different. Philippines, although a democracy, is not at the same level as India. So we were asked to wear not only masks, but also shields. And anyone who did not wear it was fined quite a lot, even in the streets, because the population is not that high, they could manage doing that. Now, when the pandemic hit, obviously the first thing that came around was firing that happened. And the first thing that was on the mind of our employees was, am I going to lose my job? And as a leader, it was your responsibility to manage all of that. Not just the well-being in terms of mental health, but also in terms of financial health. When a person doesn't know if they are going to be able to afford for their family in the next few months. And the leadership had to be very courageous and very transparent in saying, you know what, I don't know. But I know that I'll stand by you and I'll do everything that I can to make sure that it is very fair for you. Okay? Can you be sure that I'll fight for you? Absolutely. Do I know what the result will be? I do not. Now, that created a lot of anxiety because, again, leader is a person who is responsible at the end of the day. So while the employees can have faith in the leadership, the leader still has to manage everything. So the mental health of the leaders deteriorated faster, right? We had to, obviously, in the leadership, we were very candid with each other, saying, this is what I'm facing. And once we started having those conversations, everybody opened up saying, you know what, I'm having the same exact problem. I don't know how to console my employees. I don't know how to manage the anxiety as well as the apprehension as well as the uncertainty that this is bringing. I just want to make sure that everyone's able to actually make it through to the other end of this cycle. Now, as leaders, we decided that we will prioritize mental health. Okay, so what we did is we put in an EAP service, an employee assistance program for everyone, where they would have an access to a counselor who can help them specifically with mental health. We also realized that at this point of time, if I say that I'm dealing with depression, the first thing that comes to 90% of the people's mind is, oh my God, I don't know what the hell is going on. How can she say something like this over here, right? That we realized was unconscious bias. We had to know that it is okay to have a conversation, and we had to lead by example from the top. So in a town hall, the MD of the organization accepted that he's going through anxiety and he does not know what to do. And then employees opened up saying, you know, I'm feeling this as well, I'm feeling this as well. And what that led to is, instead of, even though we were working from home and everyone was separated from each other, we actually got way closer to each other. People started checking up on each other. Are you okay? How are you doing? And when we got back to work, people were able to make a case for each other, saying, you know what, we need this kind of support. Can we as an organization implement a little bit more? Can we have a little bit more flexibility here, a little more support there? And that really made us not just an organization, but a community. So it depends how you manage it, but yes, it has to be led from the top.
No, thanks for sharing, Adya. And I guess apart from the differences between how different countries reacted, I think the point you mentioned, and this is something that at least in the industry I'm in, I saw a lot of it change, which is the fact that often leaders used to think, or used to feel, and they were made to feel, we had that model of a CEO or a CXO being strong in front of their people. You know, I can't let it up, I need to be leading from the front, but the fact of the matter is you're a human being as well. So I think that was interesting to hear that, you know, that the MD himself shared the fact that he was being anxious. I can tell you stories, today I can relate to it. Pre-pandemic, one would hear stories about the fact that all of us in our professional lives, at least 2 or 3 times, go through mental depression, triggered by various things. And in the last 2.5 years, I got enough examples of it, because I would always say, where did this research come from? And when I reflect back, now I actually can think of stages in my career, pre-pandemic, where I probably had gone through it, but I just didn't acknowledge it, or people around me didn't let me acknowledge it, because, you know, the model of the leader was supposed to be someone who's always strong. But thanks for sharing. I've just been told that we're 1 minute over time, but I'm sure we can have a couple of more perspectives from both Salil and Adya, and then we'll take 2 or 3 questions. So Salil, controversial, provocative question. Let me push you a little bit over here. The pandemic was amongst us. We had those 2, 3, 4 waves, as many waves. It's gone now. We're sitting here. I don't see any masks on. But there's still trouble in the world.
Yeah, certainly.
There's economic recession, climate crisis, geopolitics, but revenge conferences, revenge tourism, revenge vacations, it's all coming back to normal, and it's fine. I think our consciousness, neuroscience tells us that we hack our positive memories more than we hack the negative memories, which is good. We need to move on. But then does this become a fad for organizations? Is it a passing? So that's why I would love to hear your talk about the wellness mitra to the happiness mitra, and what does the future hold? And we as HR leaders, what is our responsibility to make sure that people do not forget what we went through and how important this is? So your thoughts on that, and then I'll come to
You rightly said, first of all, we know that even in China and Japan day before yesterday recorded 50,000 cases in a day, which means it is not over. And we are still we are lucky, we are fortunate that in India we have somehow managed, because the vaccines also came after the end of the second phase. So only before the third phase, you had the vaccines coming in and then people getting the shots. Secondly, what is very important is to understand how did we handle this? Because once we created a department which was working day and night on it, they also came with with an approach to identify the happiness survey of the people. And that was the originating point. So a complete survey was conducted for a targeted audience to begin with, wherein people volunteered to participate in the survey. The results were scrutinized, analyzed by a team of doctors, clinical psychologists, and our own medical team. Once they have analyzed, the confidential reports were sent to people, and again, voluntarily, they were asked to participate in a workshop along with a team of clinical psychologists to understand. We have now further improved the whole system in terms, once we got the happiness score of the organization, we were able to focus on the area which was required to be dwelt upon more. So in that case, what we did that we started conducting certain engagement activities as well, because it is not only mental well-being, it is mental well-being coupled with physical well-being and spiritual well-being. So all three had to be targeted together, and that is how we approached the whole subject.
No, thanks for that, Salil. So I guess the way forward is that you clearly need to put it right in center of your organization strategies, because it's not just about HR, it's about the entire workforce, it's about the organization. So,
and more importantly, you need a lot of data. You need a lot of health data of your employees in order to work upon it. Yes.
Yeah, technology
so
helps.
we had to bring everything on the system.
So building on that, are there maybe again, same line of thinking? So one is about, okay, what organizations do. Let's look at the flip side. The session earlier was about moonlighting. India is the youngest country on the planet. Young people who are very, very confident, who have options, who have choices. They'll say, it's my well-being. Why should you care? Don't take this paternalistic approach towards me. I'm going to take care of my wellness. So how do organizations then stick to that with a Gen Z, millennial, primarily Gen Z and millennial workforce in India? Do you think you see this unraveling somewhere because that the whole employee organization contract itself is under, or do you think that irrespective organizations need to stay the path when it comes to well-being? Your thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you so much for the question, Salil. I really want to know what the formula for the happiness thing is. I'll catch up with you later after this session for that. I think it is absolutely a shared thing. Well-being is not something I can do for you if you don't want it. Nor is it that you can get it from the organization if I don't want to do it. So right now, everyone's talking about it, and that is the good thing about it, right? Moonlighting, if you wanna, like last Tuesday, I was at a Glenmorangie event, and I met somebody who's an investment banker and a content creator. What's the problem in doing that? Absolutely, if it gives you joy, if it adds to your happiness, go and do it. As Manoj was saying, if it's something that is unethical, absolutely, the organization has to protect itself as well as the other employees of the organization. But do whatever makes you happy, right? If going on a retreat makes you happy, you do that. If just sitting and having a drink with your colleagues makes you happy, you do that, right? Well-being has to be defined by each person. As a leader, our job is to make sure that people have all the options that they need to be happy. Now, what they do with it is their choice. We cannot push people. I know there was this very good video that was circulating of a person who was at an employee engagement event, and he was talking about how HR makes sure everyone comes to the event and takes a smiling picture, and then when they say, I'm unhappy, like, but you look very happy in this picture, right? That is not how it works. At the end of the day, people are happy because they want to be happy. Also, during the pandemic, people realized, what am I working for? At the end of the day, is money really going to be the thing that will make me happy? Or is my well-being, my time that I spend with my friends, with my family, going on a foreign trip, going to see Taj Mahal on a moonlight, is that going to be a thing that is going to make me happy? People put themselves at the center, and they realize there are so many amazing things out there that will actually bring well-being to them. So as an organization, our responsibility is to give them all those options via either flexibility or benefit.
Great points are there. So I guess the takeaway at an overall level, you want to come in there, Salil?
The only two things which I thought is
Please.
important. Number one, every organization needs to think now, both in terms of compassion and empathy, with some authority to handle it. I can give you some quick examples. I receive a request from a senior manager from some department, a mail. A gentleman had to go back to his native place just to attend his mother, who was actually in the last stage of cancer. So there was a request whether he can go for a work from home for next 2.5 months or not. So now there is an authority vested with the HR head to decide and approve. Similar case, somebody, a female employee in advanced stage of pregnancy, a similar request comes in and you decide. So that is something which has to happen simultaneously.
Yeah. It has to be made easy and accessible to all our people. So thanks so much, Adya, Salil. It's been great talking to you. We won't be able to take any audience questions. I'm going to be, I know I see you're already standing up, ushering us out. But couple of points. I think it's about giving your people choice. It's about giving them options. It's about making sure that this does not fade away. Let's not forget what we went through the last 3 years. I think maybe some good came out of the pandemic, which probably is better for all of us. So with that, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Great having you here, and thanks so much to my fellow panelists.